Hey, everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldai, your host, CEO of P3 Tech Consulting, and publisher at Autonomy Global. I'm telling you guys, I feel like I'm in crazy town. We are already at the end of the month of January. Where did time go? We have dedicated this month to the 2026 Look Ahead, sponsored by Caresoft, so we thank them. But this particular episode is all about an amazing company called Trajectrix. And my buddy Ray Adams is here to talk about the company he created and the amazing stuff they're doing. So, Ray, welcome to the show.
Well, Dawn, thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Absolutely. So, Ray and I go way back. For those that don't know Ray, we're going to hear his background here in a second. But I met him when I first started my company, and he and Ron Leach co founded this group called Ultra, the Urban Low Altitude Transport Association, and asked me to become a member of that, a board member. And it's been a great partnership ever since. And Ray, to watch you now in this company and transition from air traffic control as a federal civil servant to what you're doing now, it's incredible. So, without further ado, why don't you tell them in your own words what your background is?
Sure. Very simply, I'm an air traffic controller by trade, retired now, about almost 5 years ago. I spent my time in some pretty busy places in around New York, the New York area, New York Center, and Newark Tower was my last 20 years in the FAA. So I got to learn the ins and outs of exceptionally busy, complex airspace and operations in what really is the busiest airspace in the country, if not the world.
Well, yeah, lots going on in our airspace. And as drones continue to advance, and now we're seeing air taxis, right? And hearing wind of certifications on the horizon, possibly even as early as this year, it's just going to get more and more crowded, right, Ray? So you spent a career dedicated to keeping our airspace safe. When did it become clear to you that uncrewed and crewed systems were going to need to share that same sky?
Wow. So as I was retiring, or just before I retired from FAA, I started to get involved in the drone space a little bit. That's right around the time we founded Ultra. What I was realizing was there was a lot of academic knowledge coming down from different institutions, but not really any operational ground up information filtering back into that, how things were going to work. So I did a little research, started to kind of leverage my experience with low altitude operations, especially around New York, lots of helicopters, mixed with a lot of legacy traffic. And I started wondering, well, those helicopters don't always operate, high up in the air. They're kind of down where those drones are going to be. And I thought to myself, well, how is this all going to work? So started to learn a little bit about how NASA was putting out some ideas, and FAA had some, and some of the other institutions that are out there. And I said, you know what? There has to be a role for folks that understand how this has worked for the last 40 or 50 years to have a voice and really have a say in how this ecosystem kind of evolves.
Absolutely. So, as you were looking around, what gaps did you really see that led you to create Trajectrix?
Well, there's a significant gap if we talk about even just small drones and how everything is really based upon cooperative operations. It's effectively I'm going to use the GPS to tell me where I am, and I'm going to tell everybody else around me where I am. Well, over the years of air traffic, and I've worked not just in the cities, but I also worked oceanic operations and things where you didn't have robust surveillance and you didn't have robust communications. I got to learn how the layers of navigation and surveillance kind of play together to eliminate gaps. And what I was seeing in the drone space is there was no layering of those types of navigational and surveillance performance. And it was leaving the system very open to interference, right? From whether that's environmental interference or from nefarious actors' interference. And everything kind of has a single common failure point, which we don't build our air traffic systems around single common failure points. We always have backup systems, redundancies, and different technologies. So Trajectrix is an attempt to build in some layers of redundancy based upon what I call positional truth, and we can talk more about that later, and how the air traffic control system actually applies surveillance now, and finding ways to filter that into the new low altitude ecosystem and economy that's evolving.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to I'm just like writing a note because you said ask me about positional truth layers. So like I got to ask him about that. But so like if you were going to give me the 30-second elevator pitch of what Trajectrix actually is and does, what would that be?
So we have some patented technology that will allow the existing surveillance infrastructure of the FAA to be utilized in a manner that meets all the security requirements to provide that surveillance to the public without compromising national security or law enforcement activities.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So, you already kind of mentioned your air traffic control background, how it really informs your thinking here. I know, Ray, we've been watching the skies really closely over the last year. And you and I have talked quite a bit actually, when we saw what we thought were the safest, and probably it still is, right? The safest airspace in the world, but some horrific accidents occurring. For example, about this time last year was the crash in Washington D.C. with the helicopter and the military and the commercial aircraft. As and you've written about this, and so it's not just in the context of drones. It's really not just in the context of air taxis. It's holistically airspace management, right? Because and it's not just civil, it's defense as well. What are some lessons learned as the NTSB report I just saw yesterday, I think on CNN, they said like the helicopter barely clipped the wing, but the
Yeah.
fact that it happened at all is it seems mind boggling, right? Today's day and age. As you look at lessons learned from some of these incidents over the past year, and combined with your experience, how does all of that kind of inform your thinking today as you work, and move Trajectrix forward?
Or there were a number of there was a chain of failures as there typically are in any mid-air collision, right? I mean, I've been involved in the NTSB investigations on a couple of different events, and specifically the one on the Hudson River between a helicopter and a small aircraft that came off Teterboro back about 15 years ago. I was the lead representative to the controller on that. And what I learned about the crash at DCA was that there were layers of of safety protocols, but they had been peeled back
Mm,
one at a time, just enough, right? So what typically happens is you peel them back, you get comfortable, and the information is there, but it's not actually conveyed or used correctly. So there was a reliance there on a couple of technologies like cooperative technologies, like everybody talks about ADSB and talks about TCAS, which are both cooperative technologies. And believe it or not, that the information was there. There
mm.
was information on the flight deck of the aircraft of the Embraer that showed the aircraft coming from the right side. But this is my reading of it. At the time that the pilot was making that maneuver to land, he probably wasn't looking at that, and that TCAS resolution advisory is suppressed below a certain altitude. So the
Right.
information is there, and the controller had information that may or may not have been conveyed correctly. The key was nobody tied the information together. So I think that was the real lesson learned. It may not be completely relevant to what we're talking about here, but that information has to be utilized in the correct manner and has to be conveyed in the correct manner. And it has to be in the human factors loop for the pilots or the operators to understand what's actually happening. And there was a procedural breakdown there. Long story, the fact is, this is why we talk about layers of redundancy and layers of safety. It's very
Yeah.
important to have that. And Trajectrix actually brings another layer of safety in to the not just the small drone space, but when you start to integrate larger aircraft into the National Airspace System, like along the lines of a Cessna 2A Caravan, like Reliable Robotics is trying to work with. These autonomy systems and these remote pilot systems have to have the information, and they're not getting what they need right now, and Trajectrix is going to provide that.
Well, I mean, I think you just thread the needle there. You're right. Like in terms of the connection between some of the lessons learned we've seen from, unfortunately, some of the mishaps, some of which were fatal last year, and kind of going forward. Because at the end of the day, it's all about safety, right? And you're adding another layer of that. By the way, we've got Greg Larson out there saying good morning from AGS. So thank you, Greg, for dialing in. Appreciate you. And by the way, everybody, we are live, of course. So keep those comments coming. Let us know where you are. Say hello. Ask Ray. He is the expert. Any questions you have. But let's talk. Let's move back into the drone space, right? Because here we've got this very complex national airspace system. Historically the safest. We've seen some chinks in the armor over the past year. And now we're moving towards BVLOS, right? Beyond visual line of sight. We're moving towards advanced air mobility, whether that's drone delivery or what people are calling, air taxi services. As you look at this kind of emerging aviation crowd, what do you believe is the real barrier to scaling?
There's a few. There's definitely a few. The regulatory environment right now is not supportive of scaling, and there's reasons for that. When you start to look at just the ways that we translate some of our basic functions, our human functions of pilotage, into technological functions, and then the ability for the systems to understand the information, create a situational awareness picture, and then I like to say cognitively, engage in that. That regulatory environment is not mature yet. Now we're getting some really good data from the pilot projects and so forth, and the research that's being done across the industry. But the pace is slow purposely, because when the rules come out, it's incumbent upon the regulator to put the rules out safely so that they actually do what they're supposed to do. And as we see, when you rush things, sometimes you don't get the actual um, the actual end that you want, right? So
Yeah,
I think.
I'm going to jump in there for a second because I will call it breaking news. In fact, today is the day, the 28th, that this public notice and opportunity for additional comment on the Beyond Visual Line of Sight rule is supposed to be actually live for the next 14 days. If you all didn't know that, check the Federal Register, check Autonomy Global. We just wrote a news item about this yesterday and put it out. Basically, the two things they're asking for additional comment are I'll call it the big two, right? Electronic conspicuity, or e-conspicuity, and right-of-way rules. I mean, those were the two most hottest, debated topics, I think, in the BVLOS ARC, right? The Aviation Rulemaking Committee. Controversy in that report, which was what, 2021? I think when that came out, the rule came out last fall. There was an October 6th deadline that was not extended. Obviously, then we had a government shutdown and, all kinds of kerfuffle and a notional kind of directive from this current administration for the FAA to have a published final BVLOS rule within 200 and some days of this drone dominance executive order that dropped like in June. And doing that math publicly, I think it kind of equates to like kind of next week. Well, that's not going to happen with 2 more weeks of comment period plus then adjudication, theoretically, right? FAA reviewing those things. But Ray, as you're watching all of this, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on especially the right of way rules and kind of maybe where your technology fits into it. But before I get to your opinion on that, I want to be clear, like with everybody. We talked about generally what your company does, but let's get granular on the actual technology that you guys are uh, basically bringing forward to the community. Can you tell us exactly what that is and what it does and why it's important?
Well, we're still kind of stealth mode, so I can't go too deep into it. All right, so we are, as I said before, we're putting all the we're utilizing the existing infrastructure in a way that meets the needs of all of the government entities out there, all the security requirements. There are some specific things that Department of Defense may or may not want to let out.
Yep.
And we've found a way to, at least we think we found a way to to meet all those requirements while providing the same information the air traffic control system uses to these remote pilots or autonomy stacks that can then use that as a source of positional truth, the same positional truth that we use in the National Airspace System for separating aircraft. So it becomes another service layer that we can use in the XTM, the UTM/UAM ecosystem, or in whatever the airspace integration activity looks like around large legacy aircraft being retrofit with autonomy stacks to operate in the National Airspace System.
Roger that. You don't have to give us the secret sauce, but at a high level, you kind of created this term that's, I will call it new in what you're doing. It's called S-GBDAA, Secure Ground-Based Detect and Alert. So tell everybody, like, again, at a high level, without revealing any proprietary information, what it is and why it's important.
Yeah, so the S being the key component there, the secure. So as you know, with the current environment around cybersecurity and risks to technologies, including jamming and spoofing of ADS, of GPS signals, which again causes that common fault mode with lots of our surveillance technologies. We basically contain the information in a way that it minimizes any attack surfaces, cyber attack surfaces, and reduces the ability for any nefarious actor to reconstruct an airspace picture from the data. So effectively, if our national state enemies were out there trying to figure out where our military aircraft were coming from and going to, they shouldn't be able to do that while we're still allowing enough information to come out in a relevant form to be supplemental to detect and avoid services that are either built onto aircraft using onboard sensors, which don't have typically the robustness to meet the requirement under 14 CFR 91.113, which is basically see and avoid. And then also, maintain that stateless environment so that you get kind of what you need when you need it for as long as you need it, and then it goes away. So that meets all the criteria that we've been kind of working with the Department of Defense on to enable not only civilian aircraft to operate, but the DoD wants us to use it to operate their larger UAS, the National Airspace System, also.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And by the way, everybody, Fire Mech Tech, our buddy, is out there in Monterey, California, saying hello. So, hey, Rob, good to hear from you again, my friend. Happy New Year. Very belated, but great to have you back chiming in on the show. So you kind of alluded to it, Ray, and I want to go back to it a little bit. This idea of cooperative traffic, and you mentioned GPS, you mentioned spoofing, jamming, and you've been more recently very vocal about not relying on just cooperative systems like ADS-B for even detect and avoid. Why is that?
Simply said, it's really not a resilient technology. I mean, it may be for initially when we use it as supplemental technology for air traffic or for situational awareness, it serves that purpose exceptionally well because it functions most of the time well enough to provide a shared airspace picture. But there's a couple of faults to that. First off, not everybody shares their intent, that shares their positioning for reasons of national security or law enforcement. So you don't really see those things that you think everything is out there, but you don't. And secondarily, now that it's become such a ubiquitous technology, it becomes more of an interest to to those folks that don't want to do us well to spoof it, hack it, do what they can do to disrupt our systems. So why are we allowing that to be a primary method of surveillance and navigation in the National Airspace System when we know it's not resilient enough to be to meet the requirements of that 99.999% uptime that we really think about when we talk about the safety of the National Airspace System? So I look at it this way. I think we went the wrong way and we flipped the script from hard surveillance and hard comms to soft surveillance and soft comms even through SATCOM, which is unfortunately still not as resilient as some of the higher power technologies we have out there because they're lower, they're kind of a high gain, low power signal, and they're easy to disrupt. I think the air traffic control system should continue its legacy of the last 40, 50, 60, 70 years of building higher power hardened systems that have robust uptime and performance. And then, since those systems may not have all of the update rates or some of the benefits that the softer systems have, we layer those softer systems on top of the harder systems because they provide efficiency benefits or additional situational awareness. But we should never sacrifice the hardened, resilient air traffic control system for the sake of ease and cost.
I'm listening to you, and I know we've used this term layers of safety. I also think about kind of counter UAS and this idea of layered defense. I mean, there really is no one size fits all solution, I think. And, to the extent that you can have a bunch of different systems and you can integrate them and you have fail safes and fallbacks. And when GPS gets spoofed or jammed or goes down for some reason, you've got another layer of positional truth. I think it's really key. I love that term. So tell me what you mean by positional truth.
A positional truth means that we're not relying upon the aircraft to tell us where it is effectively. We have independent networks of sensors, in this case, radars, and other sensors that could be layered in that actually actively seek out aircraft, find them, and report their positions. And this is just totally the opposite of a cooperative technology. A non-cooperative radar can find an aircraft that's not squawking, that's not broadcasting ADS-B. Let's talk about drones. It's not broadcasting RID, but if you have a small phased array radar, you can conceivably see it out there. I call that positional truth, and you can correlate that positional truth with what's coming off of the aircraft. So if you have an ADS-B signal or if you have an RID signal, you can correlate them. And if you look at them, if you start to get drift in your cooperative signal, you can recognize maybe the GPS signal is kind of being spoofed or hacked, or there's some environmental factor that's making it less resilient or less degrading its performance. And you can fall back and you can say to, hey, whoever that is, maybe you shouldn't be using that, or maybe you should watch out. Your navigation may be off because we're seeing you here and you're saying you're over there. We do this in the air traffic control system now when you talk about barometric altimetry. Aircraft are supposed to report their altitude, and we look at what's on the screen, and if the altitude is off by more than 300 feet, we tell them to turn it off because it's wrong, right? We're
Oh,
we're
wow.
saying you're reporting something in your flight deck that we're getting something different at the radar itself. So
Yeah.
then we have to we layer back on some procedural requirements, procedural separations.
Yeah, it's we all have come to rely on GPS for everything. Not just in the airspace, right? Like everybody thinks like it's the be all end all. I mean, inside it doesn't work. So many other places it doesn't work. So many vulnerabilities. I was just like in Las Vegas, and my mom had pulled up this map, and we were looking for a specific restaurant in a casino. And the way it looked on the map is like we were right there, but we weren't even anywhere close to it. And so to have something that's positionally truthful is key. So let's talk about kind of SGBDAA and how it fits into the larger aviation ecosystem as AAM grows.
Sure. The way it's envisioned is this technology, this service layer, it's provided to the operator as a supplement to their detect and avoid or to their situation awareness picture, right? So let's just say you're operating in
Cape May. We got the
Cape
picture.
May.
Yeah.
We're operating in Cape May. And your aircraft wants to fly BVLOS, let's call it BVLOS or autonomously between 2 points, right? The FAA says you have to do this, 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 and this, and you have to get to what's kind of called an equivalent level of safety to meet the requirements of the CFRs. We envision this service as another factor in your safety assessment, in your package to the FAA of how you are going to meet your requirements under DAA. So, you can start to say like, well, it requires us to have some sort of a non-cooperative radar system of detection system, right? Well, maybe you have one on your aircraft itself, but these systems don't have the range of a ground-based radar system. So you might see a couple of kilometers ahead of you. When you start to increase your speed up there in the airspace and you're nose to nose with an aircraft at 250 knots each, that spacing you get, that detection window that you have is not adequate. You don't see that coming in enough time to actually maneuver without having a hard maneuver, without a collision avoidance maneuver. And really, the key here is everybody seems to rely on these TCAS, ACAS products. They are not the confliction tools. They are collision avoidance tools. And if you're at the collision avoidance layer in the stack, you're already too late.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
not here today, honestly. Yeah,
slamming on your brakes and cutting the wheel because somebody stopped in front of you is not how you drive your car every day. What
right.
SGBDA
Hopefully not,
does,
anyway. Yeah.
well, I mean, it depends. I live in New Jersey, so it kind of is. But SGBDAA, what it kind of it buys you time, I like to say. So the extends your detection horizon. It gives you the ability to tell you, the FAA or whoever you're going to be sending this package to, hey, I can see him further than you think. I can see him coming so far in advance that I don't have to make abrupt maneuvers. I can do a little shift to the left, a little shift to the right, and I can avoid the traffic. And it layers on with my in-close collision avoidance system. So again, it's just effectively giving you a greater awareness, but still preserving all the safety and security requirements around, all these homeland security type of missions. And I think it personally speeds to market. It speeds your approval to market with these new technologies.
All right. So we're talking about layers, and man, when you think about relationships and the connections that you have fostered over time, Ray, and especially as part of Trajectrix lately, a lot of layers to go through there. So I want to talk about that because you've been talking to the FAA, you've been talking to the DoD and Transcom and AMC, and we had just a picture of the Cape Atlantic test range. I want to peel all of this back. So let's start with last year and a CRADA. For those that don't know what that is, it's Cooperative Research and Development Agreement. I know that from my Air Force Academy days and being a lawyer there. So you have this CRADA, very important agreement with U.S. Transcom, that's Transportation Command, that's Combatant Command, and Air Materiel Command, which is a component command for the Air Force. Tell us about that agreement and why it's so significant.
Sure. So this cooperative agreement with Air Mobility Command slash Transcom really allowed us to access some resources inside the DoD to inform kind of what they needed and what we needed to build. So this original CRADA was to develop a test range between McGuire Air Force Base, which is in New Jersey. It's a
Yeah.
part of Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, and Dover Air Force Base, two of the biggest Air Mobility Command air bases on the East Coast. A significant presence, since U.S. Transcom is basically the UPS of the military, and everything and anything that moves around the military is under Transcom. That it gave us that tie into logistics. The DoD was very interested in advancing autonomous technologies for logistical use. So the original CRADA was signed about, I think it was in 22 or 23 with a couple parties. Trajectrix came in 25 once we developed the new technology, and it gives us the ability again to leverage the Department of Defense's knowledge, their experience, their resources, and help us develop this technology.
Very cool. So there's a great dual use, obviously, connection here with the technology you've created. So let's talk about, you mentioned Fort Dix in New Jersey, McGuire, uh, another New Jersey location. I know you're a Jersey boy, Ray. So let's tell us about the Cape May test range, what it is and what is happening there.
Sure. So the Cape Atlantic UAS test range, which is a component of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, a quasi test range authorization, right? So University of Alaska Fairbanks is one of the original test site administrators. They have a couple test ranges around the country. We got the test range about a little more than 2 years ago now under their 44803 authorization. And what we like to do under the test range is we focus on large UAS, right? So we're trying to bring research development work to New Jersey, partially as an economic development activity also for the southern part of the state, but also since we're very close to the FAA, kind of put it in their backyard so that we can get large UAS integrated into the National Airspace System for these, different types of technologies from middle mile logistics to all the way up to AAM, right? All the way up to these Jobies and Archers and all these aircraft that they currently going to fly with pilots on board, but eventually want to transition to beyond visual line of sight / autonomous operations.
Yeah, I love that. I remember when I heard about this agreement you guys had with a quasi out of Alaska. I went to their event a couple years ago up in Anchorage, and it was the first time, again, being a legal nerd, that I heard of a test site, which, Alaska is one of the official 7 original test sites. I know those were just expanded by 2, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and Indiana. To take their authorities, their legal authorities, and bring them to another state to almost like expand their presence. And the fact that you guys did that with a quasi in Cape May, I think is really cool. I know a quasi has done this in other locations. I feel like California is one of them as well. But man, what a great way to leverage, the authorities people have to make something real in a place where you live and work every day, Ray. And let's talk about the FAA and some of the conversations you have, and what does SGBDAA look like from a federal engagement or FAA engagement standpoint?
Sure. So just like any technology, and especially now under the emerging Part 146 rule, where they classify them all as automated data service providers, the FAA has a role in the validation or certification of any service that's going to be employed in the National Airspace System, depending on what level that service is. We've been in conversations with some folks inside the FAA. They're aware of what we're doing. We've had the opportunity to brief Secretary Duffy directly and the administrator and so a few other folks on that back in May. And we've got some significant interest inside of the technical center at FAA. We are, let's say we're in discussions right now to start to bring in some data from the FAA itself to start to run through the system and begin validation work on that, and eventually with live flights.
All right, excellent. Because so much going on. I just saw something about a reorg. I saw something about kind of the modernization for ATC being awarded to Palantir. Wait a minute, am I right? Is it Palantir? No,
Peloton.
Peloton.
Peloton, not Peloton, Peloton.
Peloton, PER.
Peloton.
Yeah,
Peloton is the bikes that you ride. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I always get confused with that. Every time I see them at all these events, space, defense, and I always think, wait a minute, yeah. Okay, so that's amazing. You met with some of the highest levels in the government to talk about what it is you're doing and kind of working with the DoD, working with other test sites, developing this Cape May presence, all of these things. And so let's talk about the thing that's on everybody's mind also in the air taxi world is this EIPP, the eVTOL integration pilot program. That was mentioned last year, this idea that certain sites would be selected. I feel like the deadline is coming up for those selections to be announced. Lots of people have applications. It's been kind of close to the vest, I think, in terms of, who kind of partnered with who and like what states or what areas they're gunning for. But you have kind of a pan in that fire too. So to the extent that you could talk a little bit about it, tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to see in terms of Trajectrix and the EIPP.
Yeah, so a lot of it is still locked down. We haven't released kind of the team and so forth. But the New York, New Jersey area did submit an EIPP. Trajectrix was a key component of that. We did some of the writing, or at least some of the ideas. The writing was done by some writers, but we brought some ideas to the table. We're also one of the ADSPs that's involved in some significant projects should this EIPP come our way in the Cape Atlantic test range area and the expanded test range, which we probably should talk about too. So yeah, let's just say that if the EIPP comes our direction, there'll be some really big research and development projects around ADSPs, and mixed-use airspace operations in the southern New Jersey area.
Excellent. Well, let's go there. Tell us about that expansion of the Cape Atlantic Test Range and the corridor and what you guys are trying to do there.
Yeah, sure. So, we stood the range up originally and trying to keep out of a lot of people's airspace, right? So it was a little easier to get it done, keeping it to the southern end of the state. But now we've got the opportunity to expand the range to its full potential, which would be between McGuire and Dover Air Force bases. That's in the process for 2026. We have to, it's not easy. There's lots of, as you know, it's the Northeast, right? There's a lot of major airports and air and flows of traffic, and even smaller airports that have significant flows of traffic. So we have to negotiate that, right? Walk through that and make sure everybody's comfortable. But yeah, we're going to expand it this year.
And what is this? We're looking at an image. Oops, can you pop that back? Thank you. Sorry about that. So I see green, I see red. It kind of explain what we're looking at here.
That's my really bad Google Earth map drawing of the red is the current test range that we have, and that's
Gotcha.
generally up to about 7,000 feet for most of it in altitude. The expanded range, as you can see, goes further north, and that may not be the final expansion. There may be some further expansion on that range also, but as you can see, right now it's about 80 miles north to south and about 80 miles east to west. And then if it'll probably stretch about 140-ish miles from tip to tip. So it's a significant chunk of airspace, and it lies directly between, Washington, D.C. and Boston, and between Philadelphia and New York. I mean, there's no busier airspace in the country than this, but we managed to do things based because of our backgrounds, right? Between me and Ron and the other folks we have working, we don't segregate, we integrate, right? So all of our operations are integrated into airspaces. We don't have sterile airspaces that we operate in. We make things work with existing air traffic, and we use our skill sets to do that.
Yeah, amazing. And I mean, you've been talking about this from the ground up for a long time now, and you're making all those dreams come to life. So, besides this expansion, some hopefully some positive EIPP announcements, continuing to work on your CRADA with AMC and US Transcom and all the other things you have going on. What else can we expect from Trajectrix in 2026 as you look ahead there, Ray?
Well, we're going to come out of stealth mode hopefully sometime soon.
You kind of
It's
did
just,
just now, but just so you know,
yeah,
in
a
the way
little
you
bit,
just did,
a little
but
bit. There's more to come. There's funding on the table that we have coming, and I think we could conceivably see this deployed in a research and development manner over the next year, and then hopefully with commercialization or certification of it in the next year or two after that. I mean, we know things don't move quickly, but we have all the right people, we have the right connections, and I think we have the right technology. So all we can do is keep moving forward.
interesting. This is off script, so you can shut me down real quick if you want. But I was just, as I was listening to you, and I was thinking about EIVP, I'm thinking about AAM. The FAA put out the NTAP, right, the near term approval process, kind of connecting technologies into UTM or US traffic management. Is that something, Ray, that you feel like, I know like maybe a longer term certification in the cards, but like in the near term, is that an authority you feel like you could leverage with Trajectrix to like get it going right away?
Yeah, it's possible. That's being investigated right now. We're looking at all the pathways.
Yeah,
We've got, things are moving quickly,
yeah.
very quickly now with the whole brand new air traffic control system, and the acquisition authorities have all been kind of thrown out the window, and it's really a whole new FAA we're dealing with. So, just watching the reorganization happen and how people are moving around, and some people have been lost, obviously, to buyouts. Just kind of lining all the pieces up and seeing what the best pathway is to that certification is definitely what we're working on right now.
Yeah, very important. Just again, another layer of safety in the technologies that are becoming layers of safety. So really, really cool. Ray, you go to a lot of events, or historically you have. I've seen you, of course, every year in Vegas at Commercial UAV, always raging at Spandex Nation
Thanks,
together.
Nation.
By the way, everybody, mark your calendars now. Doing it again next year or this year. for commercial UAV in September. Just kind of in the near term, where might people be able to kind of run into you, or where might you be floating around in the coming months?
Yeah, we're revitalizing what used to be called the Cape May UAS Forum. That was early on in the 2016, 2017 timeframe. There was some UAS forums going on back in the original kind of test range days. We're bringing that back and we're doing it bigger and better. So this year it's April 21st to the 23rd at the Cape May Convention Center in Cape May, New Jersey, which is absolutely gorgeous, by the way. Springtime, Cape May, the ocean, the town. It's beautiful. And we're doing that. It's a 3-day event. It will have deeply technical. I'd like it to be deeply technical. We're lining people up. So if anybody wants to reach out to me and has something to say, please, I'm sure you can get in touch with me. The culmination of that event on the third day is what we call the U.S. Roundtable. That's kind of a really bad name for it, but it is the day that we are going to listen to industry to help us inform the requirements for the next phase of the U.S. test range at Cape May, the Cape Atlantic. So we want to hear from industry what they need, what they think they need going forward, and where the industry is going in the next 10 years so that we can develop the test range with the underlying infrastructure. And we have some coming, including Trajectrix, but we have some other infrastructure that's coming in, some data pipelines and stuff like that. But we want to hear from industry. So if you want to come out and you want to have a hand or a voice in shaping one of the U.S. test ranges, please come out. Cape May, 21st to the 23rd of April. Be a great event. Great food, great environment, great beer. And yeah, love to see everybody.
And hopefully bourbon, maybe we can even whip up a bourbon R there on the fly, Ray. We used to do those back in the day. But for everybody out there, you heard it here first. And I suspect you may hear more on Autonomy Global about this in the near future. So, of course, if you haven't subscribed to Autonomy Global, please do. And, if you haven't noticed, this podcast is now brought to you by the Autonomy Global Network on YouTube, another place where you should absolutely be a subscriber. So, Ray, this is awesome. Our time has flown. We only have a couple minutes left, and I want to make sure I cede the floor to you to make any concluding remarks or cover what you wanted to cover that we didn't have a chance to cover so far. And certainly, as part of that, at the very end, tell people how they can reach you and learn more about Trajectrix.
Sure. So thank you again. It's always a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to your audience and talk a little bit about Trajectrix and kind of what we're working on. I'm super excited to see the way the industry is going at the moment, right? We've seen some real movement. We're starting to see some real change. We're just excited to be part of that. Really, to get in touch with me, it's pretty easy to find me. I mean, really, if you just go on Google, type in Ray Adams, air traffic controller, I'll come up. But simply said, I'm on LinkedIn. There's a website, trajectrix.com. My other company is Air to Elevated. It's Air to AIRDE -elevated.com. That is the other company that actually runs the test site. You can reach me there. Again, I think LinkedIn's probably the easiest way. And Dawn, I'm not sure if you're going to put something up on the screen or not, but that's probably the best way.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think we'll have your Trajectrix website here, Ray, but certainly everybody reach out to Ray on LinkedIn. He's very active there, as is his generally his partner in crime, Ron Leach, who's out there, my other buddy. So, so wonderful, Ray, to have you on the show to learn more about what you've been doing. I remember when we first met, you were still in air traffic control. I just transitioned into my company basically. And we were having those conversations about crossing the Rubicon, right? From federal civil servant into being an entrepreneur, the scariness of it, what's going to happen. And I'll tell you what, I think I'm doing all right. I'm pretty sure you're doing pretty well too. It's so great to see everything that you're doing now and to learn more about it. So everybody reach out to Ray, learn more. Hope to see you all in Cape May. In fact, I hope to be there. And so stay tuned for more on that. But in the meantime, this concludes an amazing month that we've dedicated to the 2026 look ahead. And next month, we are transitioning to the theme of AI and data. two big things happening across the world and the industry. And Victus Technologies will be our month sponsor, and we'll have Jesse Hamel on the show, the CEO of Victus, next week. So make sure to join into that. That's all she wrote, everybody. We are out here.